Now from trade, we turn to the subject of agriculture. Uganda's long-term goal, as outlined in Vision 2040, is to industrialize and transform the structure of the economy by the year 2040. Now, given the dominance of agriculture as a source of livelihood, agro-industrialization offers a great opportunity for the country to embark on its long-term aspiration of transitioning into a modern industrial economy. So how best can Uganda deliver on this agro-industrialization agenda? To answer that question and so much more, I'm joined by Mr. Edward Katende, an agriculture finance expert and the CEO of Uganda Agribusiness Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So what exactly needs to be done, or what exactly needs to be addressed to close the gaps in Uganda's agriculture system?
Yeah, I think to answer the question properly, we need to start with what we know. We know that the majority of the bulk of agriculture in Uganda is done by smallholder farmers on an average of about 2.5 acres of land. We also know that a lot of that is done by women. About 75% of this is done by women using rudimentary technology. The climate change is becoming a big issue. And as such, because of all these issues, profitability at the farm level is affected. That also is affected because of productivity, which has been negative for quite a long time, and efficiency at farm level, which is a big challenge as well. All this now feed into, when we talk about agro-industrialization, it feeds into processing. You find that a number of the agro-processors in our country are actually producing at about 40 or 45% capacity. There's quite a lot of unlocked capital out there because the supply chain is weak. And it is weak because the smallholder farmer has not been supported. So that is the gap that we need to look at. And they need to be supported in a number of ways, including access to capital, which is a very big challenge. You need capital to pay for labor, for irrigation, for quality inputs. You need the capital to do a lot of things. They need to be supported in terms of knowledge. You need knowledge to be able to profitably utilize that small land that you have so that you can use less inputs to achieve more outputs. And lastly, you need to work on the human capital. Human capital at all levels of the agricultural value chain. And those three will, in our view, as Uganda Agribusiness Alliance, will be able to help us to unlock the potential of the farming households.
Okay, and let's look at the private sector. Are there any efforts by the private sector, including development partners, to drive this agenda?
Yeah,
or how much more can they do?
If for example, I start with finance, the private sector, the banking sector in Uganda has done far much better than any banks in the region. When we started working on agriculture finance about 4 years ago, lending in this country, private sector credit to agriculture was about 7%. As we speak, it is 12.9%. And the bankers, last year in July, at their annual bankers conference, committed as bankers to increase this lending to 20%. And they have set up a committee to actually make sure that that happens. This is private sector. We are also seeing a lot of efforts, for example, the Private Sector Foundation, our own organization, Uganda Agribusiness Alliance, we have the National Farmers Federation, but also seeing a lot of capital flowing in from different donors, from development partners, the likes of Bill and Melinda Gates foundations. These are putting money in agriculture. The challenge that we have as a country is poor coordination. There's a lot coming in. There are so many efforts that are coming in, but they are not well coordinated. And the result is that the impact is not felt as much as it should be.
So how do we deal with this challenge of poor coordination?
Well, I think you've talked about the National Development Plan. It has set out quite a detailed procedure to address the challenge of coordination as far as agro-industrialization is concerned. But also the Ministry of Agriculture, for the first time, they are redoing their National Agriculture Sector Strategic Plan, and they have actually involved all of us in the process. And we hope that when the new strategy comes into operation, it will actually be much more representative of the general interest of everybody in the sector. But we still feel that the government it must put its house in order, because when we talk agri-food, Most people think it's Ministry of Agriculture, but this is actually one of the most diverse areas that affect engineering, water, health, finance, trade, and all of these need to be well coordinated to ensure that they all work for one client, that smallholder farmer or the agro-processor.
Now, you talked about the issue of access to capital or financing, which the banks have ably intervened. Let's talk about information and knowledge. How are we doing in this space?
That is our biggest challenge. Everybody you talk to in the industries will tell you data is not available. Countries that have beaten us in the sector have measured a lot on analytics. They have insights on the consumer, what the consumer wants. They have insights on where the food is coming from. As we speak today, we are at a time where traceability is a very big issue, especially for our European buyers. But without any data, we would struggle to be able to trace our coffee from farmer X to the market. When the government tried to register the farmers, you saw what happened. The farmers rejected this, but we need to ensure that we have information on everything that the farmer is producing, and at the moment, that is our biggest challenge. In our own view, that is one area with human capital development. It's one area that government, public sector money should go to.
As we wrap this up, how far away are we in terms of hitting this agenda? Because it's 2040, now it's 2020. Will we catch up in 20 years, you reckon?
I think we've done the second version of the National Development Plan. They are supposed to be 6, so we have 4 to go. The new one is coming up, and I think the new one is building on the last 2. Have we achieved the targets that we set in the last 2 National Development Plan? The answer is no. We all know that, yes, we had assumed that by now we'll be a middle-income country. We have not got there. And that affects a lot of things that we had assumed to take place. So we need to double our efforts. As business people, we want to see more business talked about than politics. We need to see more business out there. We need to see more support for the private sector to ensure that when the new development plan comes into play, the private sector will actually be a leader. Because when you ask government, when you say Uganda is a private sector-led economy, you wonder what that means, because the private sector is never allowed to lead. But in the new plan, we hope that our government can allow us to lead to the development of our country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edward Katende. Mr. Edward Katende is the CEO of the Uganda Agribusiness Alliance, and was joining us for a conversation on Uganda's agenda towards agro-industrialization. NBS Live at 9 takes a break.